Dr. Umar Johnson here from Hidden Colors, from great videos from YouTube, all the way from Philadelphia. It's now question and answer time. Umar is pretty open to all questions. Let's keep it respectable. He's come down here to give us knowledge, and let's receive knowledge. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Umar Johnson, and who has the first question? I see a hand up all the way to the back. Prince Ice, take this side, take that side.
Peace, Elder. Please hold the mic up to your mouth, please. Thank you.
The question I have is about the 20th anniversary of the Million Man March. Since there was really two parts to the march. One was people being there, and the second part was the type of boycott that took place. You know, and the minister is calling for a boycott on the 9th of October and for everyone to come out, justice or else. Do you have any information on that?
I don't have any information, but my perspective on it, I agree with the march. I'm going to support it. I was there for the first one. In fact, I think I attended every one. And I think that as a show of solidarity, it requires my participation and my attendance. I think that a lot of black people are looking for some sort of direction in which to go in. And I think the minister can be the catalyst for that. I do think this time around, though, we have to make sure we have a sustained program so that measurable gains can come from the march. We can't wait 10 years for follow-up. It needs to be immediately. And I think the minister knows that, and I think we'll get that this time. So the march should only be the catalyst for something much greater that should begin the very next day after the march. But I support it, and I plan to be there.
What was Egypt like in Ghana?
Egypt was powerful. I just came back from Africa, my second annual group tour, and I invite everyone here to go next year. We go the same time every year, the last 2 weeks of July. Last year we did Morocco and Ghana. This year, Egypt and Ghana, very powerful to finally see the pyramids live and in color. And next year, it'll probably be South Africa or Nigeria in Ghana. And one of the reasons Nigeria is of importance to me is because it's the fastest growing economy on the African continent. And I would say, based on my own experience in Africa, that the Nigerian is the most unapologetic of all Africans on the continent. They are not afraid of white folk, and I think we need to work with them.
Brother Umar.
Yes, sir.
So good to be in your presence again. Last time you was in Colombia, I think in 2014, I was the one that videotaped you. So I interacted with you a lot then. But one of the things that you said earlier was trying to put something together. And I know what you said, we don't, touch on the religion or whatever, but the hardest thing that I've found sometimes is just trying to pass information and trying to uplift our people to come together. And the thing that I've seen is most of us don't know who we are. So, I try to educate. I'm an instructor at Centura College, but certain ones of my students, which I'm proud to say, I've seen one of them here today, Brother Oscar, he came out to see you. He gave me information that you were coming. And so what can we do to try to, we don't want to step on any religion's toes, like you said, but what is the best way to do to try to get our people to come together and know just who we are? Because I always tell them, when you know who you are, you conduct yourself a certain way. When you know who you are, you talk a certain way. When you know who you are, you act a certain way. And it's obvious that we know there's certain people, the ones in this room, give yourselves a hand because they know who they are.
I would say that we got to recognize that sometimes lecturing our brothers and sisters is not the best way to bring them into consciousness. I get a lot of emails from parents who say, I'm trying to bring my son or daughter into consciousness because I am, and I'm struggling doing so. Well, that's because they're always lecturing People don't want to be lectured. They feel like they're being judged. What I always say is there's no compulsion in consciousness. People come to it at different times for different reasons. I think we have to expose them to the information. For example, I'll tell someone, maybe you're not the best messenger for the consciousness. Maybe you need to take them to the lecture, take them to an event, pass them a book to read, put on a DVD. We have to use a multimodal approach to evangelize our people back into Black power. Sometimes the one-on-one, face-to-face, what you're doing is wrong, this is what's right, sometimes that doesn't work. He can bring my daughter to consciousness better than I can. Okay, I can bring his son to consciousness better than he can. We have to recognize that we may not be the best person to build that bridge for our people. And we should try to link them up with other folks of like mind who can do just that. Because a lot of times, it's not the message, it's the personality bringing the message that can be the turn off. And so we have to make sure that we're not blocking people from receiving the light from someone other than us.
Dr. Umar, thank you for coming back to South Carolina. I missed you
you
when you came to Charleston. We're going to have our first African Conscious event October 31st to try to spread it to our community because we're kind of new to the consciousness movement. But my question is, when we, say for instance, we get people interested in putting their money in one area because we know that that's the center of more things that we want to make happen, like for instance your school and things like that. Once we get them interested in it, how do we go about actually making it happen? Do we try to find Black people who have been bankers for a while? Do we try to educate ourselves in a certain program that will get us prepared for that? Do you have any suggestions on that route?
I think both. I think there's no replacement for self-study. I think there's no replacement for trained, licensed, credentialed mentorship in a certain direction. And then I also think there's a place for those who are working on that initiative to study together so we learn about the process as it unfolds. Because a lot of times in Black organizations, we will give a large responsibility to one or two people. Everybody should know how that business should operate. Everyone should know what needs to be done, because when you allow one or two people to monopolize something that's so important, they end up becoming the power base in the organization. And if they're not principled people, they can use that to their advantage. So I would say study, but also get individuals, because we have all the professional experience we need. We just have to tap into it. The problem is that a lot of the professionals with the know-how don't have the commitment to make it happen. So because you have the commitment to make it happen, all you have to do is tap into their expertise. They won't have a problem guiding you. It's just that they don't want to do it. For example, you walk into a Black bookstore, we have a book for every problem. The problem been solved in the book 50 times over. The problem is the people writing the books are not committed enough to put their solution into play.
How you doing?
Peace, my brother.
All right, peace. Thank you for doing everything you're doing for Black people.
Thank you.
My question was, I've been studying reparations. Like the Native Americans get reparations, the Jewish get reparations from Germany, and the Japanese actually get reparations also from World War II. I was wondering, is it too far along for us to try to come together and demand reparations?
No, we can get it. Couple issues. Issue number one, unlike all the other groups you named who've received reparations, we're probably the only group to go through a Holocaust and have members of the victim group argue against receiving reparations. So you have just as many Black folk who say we need to forget about slavery and move on, and the white man don't owe us anything. So part of the reparations fight is you have to fight Black people who say we don't need the reparations. Point number two is we have to also recognize that reparations are given to nations, okay? Not to populations of citizenry within a nation. That is to say that in order for us to get reparations, we have to disidentify as from being Americans on some level, because reparations are given to nations. So we have to recognize that we are prisoners of war and victims of white supremacy. Because in order to win the reparations battle, we have to take it to the world court, not America's courts. If you take it to America's courts, then you're admitting that America has jurisdiction over you. Take it to the world court as a population of Africans in exile. So it must be fought on the international level. The third issue with reparations is what we are actually demanding as payment. One of the concerns I have with the current reparations struggle is I've heard a lot of talk about dollar amounts. I'm concerned about dollar amounts because the dollar isn't worth much itself. And if we accept a financial payout, that's a setup. Why is that a setup? Because we don't have any infrastructure. So if black folk was given $2 million apiece with no financial infrastructure, all that money goes right back to white folks tomorrow. Which is why I believe that there are white people who are praying harder than you for black people to get reparations. Oh, y'all following me? Because they know the money comes right back to them. I believe that those in the reparation struggle should build infrastructure first to include these banks so we can trap the wealth in the hood. Otherwise, it becomes an economic stimulus package for white folk. And the last thing I'll say on it, too, number one, I don't like the way we conceptualizing the reparations fight. Everybody benefited from African enslavement. So all guilty parties should be named in the lawsuit, not just America. What about the Arab countries of North Africa who still trade slaves today? Why haven't they been named? Why haven't the Roman Catholic Church been named as a guilty party? The British East India Company, the British West India Company. What I'm noticing is that some of these reparations personalities are afraid to indict all guilty parties. And we have to make sure we understand that we only get one shot at this reparations piece. It has to be done right. Money should not be on the list. Why? Because money runs out. And the benefit to America of the forced enslavement and labor of black folk can never run out. As long as there is an America, they benefit from the forced labor of our ancestors. So whatever we receive as payment, likewise, should never run out. So whether that's black folk never paying taxes, whether that's black folk controlling certain natural resources, whether it's black folk that have total control over certain land masses, certain waterways, whatever we get must be something that can never expire with time. Money runs out. And if we put money as the payment, that's a setup. Last thing, there must be internal reparations before there can be external reparations. There's work that we must do as a people that the white man cannot fix. He started it, but he can't solve it. He started self-hate, but he can't solve self-hate. He started the petty differences, but he can't solve the petty differences. So there's a lot we have to work on together because the internal must precede the external. If you get the external before we fix the internal, that money won't help. It'll become a greater hindrance to our unity.
I'm going to take about 2 more questions.
What you're dealing with our people is post-traumatic slave syndrome, and we have to deal with that. And before we can even get to our people, even get them to buy into what we're trying to do. I have something I'm trying to do. I want to know your thoughts on it. And I call it the Great Exodus. I've told a lot of my brethren that's in the north, brothers and sisters in the north, they need to move down south. And this could be part of that reparations. We need the land, free the land. We need to move our brothers down here where we can grow our own food, we can do our own, all business, build a nation here within this nation, since it's ours anyway. We were here first. Omex. What do you think about that? And adding that part of that reparations and get them to move down south and take all the southern states, I say.
I agree. In fact, it's already in action. The media has been documenting 2 great exoduses of black folk in America. One has been back to the South. we've seen an exodus back to the South that's almost as powerful as the Great Migration of the early 1900s. The other exodus is back home to Africa. A lot of black folk, especially retirees, are quitting America and going back home. And what America is doing to deal with that is they are now restricting your retirement pension to only be offered out to you if you live in a geographical territory of the United States. If they find out that you're living in Africa, you won't get your pension. Because their argument is your pension is based on you contributing to the American economy with that money, not the African economy. Okay? But there's ways around that. But here's what I want to say. I agree with it. But I also think we got to recognize something in the long term. In the long term, white power cannot tolerate black power next door because it's a contradiction in sovereignty. So once we ultimately build up in the South or wherever we do it, we have to recognize that sooner or later we're going to have to repatriate that empire, that community, to a black country. Now, it ain't got to be Africa. That's my choice. But it would have to be the Caribbean, Central or South America. And this is something that the Black Power brothers, I often talk to them, you're not dealing with this thing realistically. Tulsa, Rosewood, Charleston, Wilmington. Whenever black power threatened white power, it had to be destroyed. As it was yesterday, it will be tomorrow. So I would say the short-term plan, let's move to the South and build up. But once we perfect that nation-building process, we must automatically be looking to where we're going to exodus that program so it doesn't get destroyed. White power cannot tolerate black power next door.
Do you think,
Go ahead.
do you think, I know a lot of times they built a lot of trees to prevent us from doing trade with the motherland, like Marcus Garvey was doing. How do we circumvent that? Do we put pressure on our political leaders in order to change these things or something like that?
Well, the political leaders ain't thinking about Pan-Africanism. In fact, one of the black man's biggest problem in America is that we do not think as Pan-Africanists. We have to recognize the black predicament doesn't exist in a vacuum. The black predicament is part of a larger global international African challenge. And our situation is part and parcel to the African struggle in the Caribbean, in Europe, in Canada, and in Africa. Everyone knows that the respect that people get is a direct reflection of the respect that their international homeland receives. Black people in America will never get the equality we so much desire as long as Africa isn't equal with Europe. See, we want to separate ourselves from Africa and then say, respect me as an African American. That's a contradiction. Your struggle is a part of the African struggle, and as she goes, so goes the rest of us. And this has been the biggest issue with black progress, not tying it to the overall progress of African people around the world. The pressure has to be put on African countries. The African Union has to be made to be accountable for its rhetoric of claiming that all Africans in the diaspora belong to Africa, because we're not seeing it. However, I do recognize the fact that we as Africans in the West haven't done our part to help pull Africa out of the 19th century. Africa needs our money. Africa needs our education. Africa needs our time and our commitment, and she's not getting it. And because she's not getting it, it opens up a vacuum for the Chinese to go in and exploit. It opens up a vacuum for the East Indian to go in and exploit. And everywhere you go in Africa, there's a different non-African so-called ethnic minority group dominating the economy. That's the void we should be feeling. And if we don't hurry up and wake up to our realization of our responsibility on the continent, Africa will be recolonized again, not by the white man, but by the Chinaman. We have to hurry up and get it done now.
Okay, we got one more question.
Hi, Dr. Johnson.
Peace, Queen.
I would also like to thank you for coming to Columbia, South Carolina, because you're helping a lot of people to get through this maze. And I would like to ask you about the military, because I was in the military. And it's amazing to me how before the military, I was a creative character. And it seemed like while I was in the military, creativity was on pause. And as I got out of the military, it was full-fledged again. And I just had a little cousin that joined the military, and I was trying to ask her why and trying to get her not to. But then I have people around me who I care about who support her in doing that. And it's a lot of people I know who support young kids and join the military because, you know, I was one who did it at 18. So I just want to ask you how you feel about the military and how to get people to see that there are other options besides the military, but also there are great leaders in the military that could be great leaders, you know, in the conscious community. How to get to that population, get to those people.
I'm not a fan of the military. I don't think no African should join it. But I do understand everyone's individual life circumstance may dictate that joining the military might be a safer option than staying on the street. Okay, sometimes when brothers and sisters go to court, the judge will say, go to military or I'm putting you in jail. How can they not choose the lesser of the two? So I'm not a fan of the military. I'm also conscious of the fact that the United States government likes to restrict the life opportunity of black males so they have no road open except the military. They make sure there's no trade school. They make sure there's no business opportunity. They make sure you don't qualify to go to college. So the only thing left is the military. You even see the commercials now. Okay, they've gotten even more strategic with the commercials that they sell into our young folk. And there were No Child Left Behind that really helped the military snatch up young black people. A lot of people don't realize it, but the No Child Left Behind law was more about the military than it was about testing. No Child Left Behind gives the Army, the Marine Corps, the Coast Guard, and everyone else the opportunity to come into America's high schools and middle schools and look at the children's records without parent permission to determine which children they think are most likely to become losers in life so they could prey on them to be early signers into the military. You see, that's what No Child Left Behind is about. And any school that doesn't allow the military to come in and investigate student record to see who they think they can get by stepping to you and saying, listen, your daddy went to jail, your grandfather was a dope addict, your great-grandfather was no good. Listen, you need to come into the military or you're going to end up like them. So what they do is they prey on our boys by telling them that without us, you can be nothing. Now, the conditioning process of the military, especially the Marine Corps, okay, is so thorough of a conditioning process that once you go through it, it's hard to undo it. I don't care how many Hotep books you didn't read. Once you didn't been in that Marine Corps, it's kind of hard to not be a Marine even after you get out, okay? And so I'm saying that to say the best thing we can do is keep our young folk from going into the military to begin with by making sure they have opportunities. See, our young people need opportunities. A black teenager has the most difficult job of finding an after-school job of any teen in America. Black teens, the most difficult employable sector in America. How can that be? Businesses would rather hire a non-English speaking child than hire one of ours because of the stereotypes and the racism. Our babies need opportunity. We can organize the neighborhood. We can structure the neighborhood. We can put law and order and protocol back in the neighborhood. But in order to do that, we have to be able to do something that every other culture can do for their neighborhood. And you know what that is? Provide them with viable employment. The black community cannot employ its own. Who wants to be proud to be black when you belong to a community that can't do nothing for you? It becomes easy to love being black when your community can do things for you. But when your community ain't got nothing for you but another lecture, you get thirsty for other opportunity. And you start turning your back on that very same community. It's easy to be proud to be Chinese because you can get a job right from your community. It's easy to be proud to be an Arab. They got opportunities for them. It ain't easy being proud to be black because you're holding a banner for people that have no opportunity for you. The information, the knowledge of self, the consciousness is only going to hold our young people so long. I speak in the prisons. There's brothers and sisters in jail who have mastered black consciousness. There's nothing you can teach them. They've already mastered it. And many of them mastered it before they got locked up. They didn't get locked up because they didn't know who they were. They didn't get locked up because they didn't have knowledge of self. They got locked up because they couldn't find an economic opportunity. Criminals are not born. Criminals are made. Everyone in this room is a potential criminal if someone took away from you the opportunity to earn a decent living. If we don't start meeting black men where they are, we're going to lose them. And the reason black men ain't going to church, because church ain't got no jobs. Church is taking money, but not putting no money back into the community. And my biggest issue with church, or mega church in particular, how can you build a $5 million structure that's going to require a $10, $20 million mortgage? You're extracting money from your congregation, but you don't put a single black person to work. And we'll talk about how the Chinese are raping the black community, and we'll talk about how the European Jews are raping the black community. I'm sorry, the biggest economic rapist of the black community is the black church. How can you preach about heaven, but you so content with having your followers live in hell while they're here on earth? And something has to be done about that contradiction.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Dr. Umar Johnson. Let's stand.